with my dad's job, we moved around a lot, and I felt like I had to get into friend groups relatively quickly, and to be as expressive and extroverted as I was kind of seen as like troublesome or annoying, and it bothered people. And so then it felt like, okay, I need to uh, change the way that I am to fit into these groups. And then when I found substances, it was like, here's the solution to help me not care about what other people think about me.
I struggled a lot with worthiness and self-esteem issues, depression and anxiety.
I was bullied and picked on, and yet like it was these maybe smaller moments where like I would get a look that I was so embarrassing, just my existence embarrassed somebody else, that created so much tension within myself that those were the moments where I retreated inward and said, I can't be myself any longer.
We're in Silicon Valley, and so it's people are compensating hugely by their performative nature and all the ways in which they're maybe exceeding outwardly in life, but still yet struggling inward. And so the issue, even if you're not struggling with substance use, the issue of codependence, there's a lot of work to do in that. And that's a really powerful arena. And it's also a little more mysterious because it's not as concretized as a substance.
Today's conversation is about recovery, but not just sobriety. It's about what comes after survival, how people heal, reconnect with themselves, and build a life that actually feels whole. My guests today are Greg Vorst and Michael Nolan, co founders of Embodied Recovery, a treatment center in Silicon Valley that approaches addiction and mental health through both science and the soul. Their work blends traditional therapy and a 12-step recovery with ancient wisdom and embodied practices designed to help people regulate their nervous systems and process trauma, as well as reconnect with their inner wisdom. I really want to thank both of you for joining me today on the podcast. I'd like to start by talking a little bit about each of your backgrounds and how you joined together to form this treatment that you're offering to people.
Sure. Yeah, we'd be happy. That intro was solid. You're
Yeah.
doing this. That was fantastic.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Just a few years of practice. That's all. That's
that
all.
was great. You already,
Sure, I can dive in. My entry into this world was not by virtue of substance use or any struggle with substance use, but I struggled a lot with worthiness and self-esteem issues, depression and anxiety. So if I were to enter into our programming, I would have been somebody that was in the mental health track. And I I deeply sought spiritual solutions to the struggles that I was having. I was something of like a spiritual addict in a sense. Like I was seeking these highs, and it was quite a profound journey. But my life looked like I could have been involved in substance use. Like there was just a lot of wreckage, and there were a lot of areas that needed to be tended to and cleaned up. And thank God I found my way into the recovery rooms, and that's actually a really solid foundation for then being a therapist as well.
It strikes me, and I want to get to how you met Michael in
yeah,
just a second, but it strikes me, we've heard the term alcoholic personality.
yeah,
I think we all know people who have what we would consider that who aren't using substances. And so it also makes me think of how mental health and substance use disorder almost always go hand in hand, whether one causes the other or one is self-medicating, using substances to self-medicate
Mhm,
a mental health issue.
mhm. That's very accurate. I think a lot of times people see that as different. In our treatment space, we've really seen the way in which not only are they struggling with very similar issues, but finding different solutions. But people who are struggling with mental health and addiction can really benefit from hearing each other. In
yeah.
fact, that was my journey. I wandered into an AA room, even though I never struggled with drinking. And for the first time in my life, I felt like, wow, I can hear somebody who's talking to my struggle. I wasn't struggling with alcoholism, but I could really hear in their shares a lot of what was in my predicament.
That's so interesting, I think, because we like to other the addict. We like to say, there's something wrong with them when all of us may be facing similar struggles, just some people are using substances to cope with those struggles. And so, Michael, I know that was the case for you. You struggled with opioid addiction as well as alcohol. Is that correct?
Yeah, it was pretty much anything I could get my hands on. I found a way to turn that into a solution for myself, a self-destructive one for sure. But I guess just to a little bit about my background, I grew up and I felt very energetic, very open-hearted. But with my dad's job, we moved around a lot, and I felt like I had to get into friend groups relatively quickly, and to be as expressive and extroverted as I was kind of seen as like troublesome or annoying, and it bothered people. And so then it felt like, okay, I need to change the way that I am to fit into these groups. And then when I found substances, it was like, here's the solution to help me not care about what other people think about me. And then I was able to kind of get into the social circles that I was wanting to fit into. And then it progressed relatively quickly. And then, my substance use got to the point where I was getting into trouble and got arrested 3 times in like a 6 month period and had to do treatment. Otherwise, I was going to go to jail. And this was all before I turned 21. And so then when I turned 21, I resentfully stayed sober on my 21st birthday. And then that resentment led me to having a drink one day with my cousin at Chipotle. And the sky didn't fall and nothing terrible happened. And so I thought, maybe I'm not an alcoholic. Maybe I can do this. But that just, it was like, I'll say sometimes that it kind of cracked the door open wide enough for me to see what I really wanted on the other side. And so then I got back into smoking weed every day. And then it was back to looking for pills and harder drugs. And so that was another maybe 3 year journey that ended up with me in some really scary places where, I finally got to a place where I saw that this was the life I was going to continue living, and was able to find a treatment center with the help of a bunch of people in Redwood City called the Sequoia Center. And at that point in my life, I was just willing to listen to what other people were suggesting, even though I didn't like it, because the decisions that I was making for my life were clearly leading me to places that I didn't want to go. And so when I would say, okay, I've done 30 days in treatment, I'm ready to go back to school, they'd say, no, you need to stay here for another 4 weeks. And I, you know, push back and say, I don't need to be here that long. I have to get back. I have a life and I have things to do. And, the program owner would say, like, you have no business being in school right now. Like, what in the world would make you think that you have the clarity of mind to make a choice like that? Take our recommendations, do the things that we're telling you to do, and you'll get back to school when you're ready. And so it was a frustrating journey, but that was, that first 3 months was really pivotal in my early experiences in recovery. Then I went back to school and started working as a counselor in different programs.
That company went belly up like 3 months after we met. And so it was, I had moved up here from LA at that time. So I really didn't know anybody with the exception of Michael, was in a new town. And the last month and a half of our work there, we also didn't receive a paycheck. So we got close really quick.
Well, it's funny and thinking about it too, for someone that moved around so
Yeah.
much and wanted to make friends quickly. Greg moves to this area where he doesn't know anybody and is looking to make friends. And I'm like, no, I don't need any friends. Like, we're just coworkers, and
Yeah.
you're doing a great job. But no, he was great at what he did, and was really engaging and passionate about Sundo and recovery. And so,
And there was something in that crisis where I think both of us were taken on a journey in our own recovery where I think for me, I used to sort of hide in the shadows and let other people lead. And there was just something about the circumstance that we were in. We were caring for a lot of people and supporting them in their recovery, and the place was falling down around us. And it required somebody to step into it, more of an adult role. And what we were noticing at a lot of the treatment centers that we worked for, even though Mike and I had received some really outstanding mentorship and support in our earlier years, at that point, we were having this experience of working for leadership that were themselves struggling with addiction. So that it started, I don't think either of us had really set out to be leaders, but we had this recognition that if we don't do that, we're going to be facing this scenario likely again. We really wanted to protect the work that we were doing. And so we were kind of just by virtue of the circumstances, we were really given an opportunity to be deeply challenged and see something, an opportunity to create something together.
And you could start it really from scratch and make it what you wanted it to be, right? Maybe what you saw was lacking in other areas you could make up for. So did you have a formula in mind?
Sure.
And what do you think people maybe don't understand about substance use disorder
Mhm.
that you wanted them to understand?
Yeah. Uh, That's interesting. I think that at that time, our roles were different in that particular organization, and Greg was the head of the intensive outpatient program, where he was running all of the groups by himself and doing all of the individual sessions, and I was running more of like the outpatient clinic and just the individual sessions, and so we were working together, but it was less collaborative. But then when that company closed and I was hired at a residential program. They were in need of a clinical director. And I said, well, you should talk to Greg. He's a great therapist. And so they brought Greg in and hired him as the clinical director. And I was their program director. And that was really the stage that allowed us to start working more collaboratively and more creatively together on the teachings and the practices and the processes that we wanted to implement in a treatment environment. And so it wasn't so much like there are these things about substance use disorders that people don't know, as much as there are so many people that are working in the field of substance use disorder treatment and mental health treatment that maybe see themselves as immune from the necessity of recovery in their own life. Because I'm working in treatment, this is my recovery, or because I'm helping others, I'm the expert, or I'm the one that shows up to fix them. And there was maybe a bit of a wall up around what they were doing to take care of their recovery needs. And so that was more like the beginning of those conversations was, what can we do to create a program that would really hold the staff accountable to the same rigorous recovery work that we're holding the clients accountable to.
Hmm.
Yeah, and from that, the notion of embodied recovery was born because we were really thinking, to the best of our ability, we wanted to live into that promise and then model it to our clients because there's, we know this from having worked with incredible mentors, but there's a felt presence of somebody who's living in that integrity. And that more than any technique or any theory is so transformational in somebody's life. So if you get the chance, you're out there and you're struggling, and you get the chance to work with somebody who actually is embodying the thing that you're seeking, you're going to have a far greater opportunity to experience that. In all likelihood, that was our experience. So we wanted to set up that space, that container wherein the team would be held to the standard that we're seeking to teach.
That's so interesting because I don't think many other people talk about that. The therapist or whoever the helper is
Mhm.
just is seen as sort of separate from the person in recovery, where really maybe they shouldn't be, because if they're able to open their hearts and their minds in a way that can help someone else that they're working with,
Mhm.
that it's not just about, oh, this person has the problem and I'm the fixer. right? That's what I hear you say.
Well, and just like you said earlier, right, is that there's so much othering of the person who's struggling with an addiction, and so it's not just their family members or society. It can certainly be treatment professionals that, and and I worked at places
Yeah.
where counselors would say, "Oh, well, they're borderline, or they can't be helped," or and there was this attitude towards certain disorders that felt like they're being written off before given the opportunity to experience the gifts of recovery.
Sorry, I know you've got a thought emerging, but in that moment when the therapist or counselor is judging and writing someone else off, something is actually coming up in the therapist or the counselor that needs tending. And that's why I'm judging that individual. So I have an opportunity, if I'm really in tune to my own process, now I have an opportunity to tend to my own healing. And in fact, the way that we hold it, these clients, the ones that are struggling with whatever it is that their particular challenges, part of their coming to is to support us in our continued growth and evolution as well. And so in the years of doing this, it's been amazing to see. We'll have a counselor that's working with somebody that brings just the issue that would trigger that counselor. And to be of service to that client, the only way they can be of service to that client is to tend to that part of themselves that's being activated. And so there really is, when the work is genuine, there is that kind of um, uh, reciprocal relationship of some sort. That's not quite the right way to describe it because we need to be, in essence, a step or two ahead in many of the key areas that the client is struggling with. But if I'm not aware of my own issues and what's coming up for me, it's going to be very difficult to start.
Yeah, I've heard that concept that if there's somebody you're having difficulty with, I mean, not even in a therapy, situation. If there's another person you're having difficulty with, or something in them really bugs you, it's because you don't want to look at that very thing in yourself. It's something, I mean, I've heard that concept before and I've thought a lot about that. So I think that's interesting in the therapist, client relationship that could also be the case. And we certainly know there is stigma, I mean, among medical professionals for people suffering from substance use disorder, and I could see that even stretching as far as those people who choose to be in that field.
Yeah, yeah, that's very true.
Are you ready to protect the next generation from the dangers of substance use? Emily's Hope has created a comprehensive K through 12 substance use prevention curriculum designed to educate, empower, and equip students with the tools they need to make healthy choices. Our age-appropriate lessons start in kindergarten and build through high school, using science, real stories, and interactive learning to help kids understand their bodies, brains, and risk of drug use. We're already reaching thousands of students across multiple states, and we're just getting started. Visit emilyshopeedu.org to learn more and share our curriculum with your school administrators and counselors. At Emily's Hope, we believe prevention begins with education. Let's work together to keep our kids safe.
So one of our 12 core teachings will present to the public. And last night we presented on the decision maker, and we referenced Viktor Frankl's book, Man's Search for Meaning. And in that book, he talks about, between stimulus and response, there's a space. And in that space lies our freedom and our power to choose. And so the mindfulness work, and we'll talk more about the Sundal practice specifically, but it allows me to get back to that place inside my own mind where I can see my capacity to make choices rather than living life on autopilot and judgment and these, distorted core beliefs and all these ideas that I believe are just common sense or it's just normal or this is just the way things are. I get to come back to a place within myself where I feel more empowered to create the experience of life that I'm wanting. And Sundal it was funny because when we were having some of these earlier conversations about what would it be like if we started a treatment center together, Greg said, "Well, look, I've got this radical demand, that if we're going to do this, we practice Sundal every day." And, and I had thought, like, why this guy, he is serious about this thing. And at the time, like I had done some breath work and I had done yoga and I had done some mindfulness practices, but it was never a coherent practice that I was committed to on a daily basis. It was more of like, in case of emergency, break glass and breathe, nice and slow. And this was a very different demand. And when I started engaging in it regularly, I began to feel so much more grounded and centered. And it took a while to get there because initially it was frustrating, but yeah.
Explain to our audience what Sundo is.
Okay. Yeah. So it's an ancient Korean Taoist practice. It was for legend holds that it was practiced in the caves for thousands of years, and it was introduced to Korea, the city, um, city life in Korea in like about 1967. And so a man came down from the mountains and introduced that tradition, but it contains some elements that would be similar to yoga. There's three parts to the practice: warming up, which includes like calisthenics and stretching. And then the main work in Sundo is breath work. And that's the center section. And then the final one is cool down. And that includes some physicality of like kicks and fingertip push-ups and headstands and different things, as well as some stretches. But the main work of it is this lower diaphragmatic breathing, and it's done according to progressive postures. So there's up to about 500 different breathing postures, and it's done on a belt system. And so essentially, what you're learning to do in the early stages is relax your chest and shoulders and breathe lower diaphragmatically into your lower abdomen. And what that can do is it creates the capacity for me to start to train myself to be in the parasympathetic branch of my nervous system to initiate the relaxation response. And this is really critical if I'm struggling with mental health or addiction. I probably routinely have the experience of things not working out well in my life, but also I may be kind of in the dumps or in the gutter um, internally, where I'm not getting good messages from within, from my inner experience of my body. And so Sundo, it's marvelous when you can train the breathing in such a way that you get to the relaxation response. What you start to do is produce chemicals like serotonin, which is like the feel good and the ease that we want to feel in life. And then you can harness that technology in such a way that you're producing it every day. Um, and then the final thing I just want to add is you're learning to stay open and to self regulate while facing challenge from different areas and different degrees of challenge. So, some of the postures you'll be twisting and turning, but while you're doing that, you're learning to stay in your center, doing that lower belly breathing and regulate. And so it's an awesome model for life because we face so many diverse challenges. And the task in this is then, how do I stay in my center? How do I stay regulated? And this helps so much with emotional regulation. And how do I feel good even in the midst of facing challenge?
Yeah, people using substances are really looking for something outside of
You
themselves
got it.
to solve an immediate problem, right?
That's right.
And whether that be an immediate problem in their thought process in their brains or an external thing that's triggered them. And so this is training them to look within.
You got it. And think how empowering that is. Oh my God. I'm wrestling for something outside of myself, but no, it's right here with me. Wherever I go, I can find that.
And that is the practice, I think, a lot of meditation, right? Meditation is going within instead of looking without. Can people, I mean, not everybody can come to your recovery center. You are located in California. Can people find good tutorials on Sundo out there on YouTube and other things like that?
Yeah, yeah. In fact, we'll provide some links for you on that. But our master teacher is actually the son of the original man who came down from the mountains. and he's in Korea, but he has quite an extensive, and it's all translated to English. It's a very extensive library, which can teach you everything that you would need to know about the tradition, and there's follow along practice and so forth.
Yeah, we'll want to include some information in our show notes here for people who want to follow up and are interested in this. Does it work for everybody that comes to your recovery center?
That's interesting.
Yes, there's a caveat to that though.
Yeah, it's similar to recovery, right? So at the end of every 12-step meeting, they get together and they might say a prayer, and then they say, "Keep coming back. It works if you work it." Right? So they don't say, "Keep coming back. It works. We promise. Just hold on tight long enough."
There's a contingency.
That's right.
Yeah. So if somebody is in, this is amazing. Like, we've had clients that were, you know, multiple years and even decades of resistant to every form of antidepressant, have not experienced any happiness in their life whatsoever. And all of those years recover their smile, recover their sense of inner joy and their agency in life. So it works if you're willing to get down on the floor and do it. It really does.
That's so interesting, and I could see the appeal of something like that over some of the other maybe alternative therapies that we're seeing now in terms of like psychedelics, ketamine. I mean, all these different things that are coming out right now, and people are always looking for a quick, easy answer to their problems. I don't care what your problem is, right? That's what everyone is looking for.
Yes.
I mean, ultimately, don't want to work that hard. Sundo sounds like you might have to work a little bit at that, right?
Yes.
Um, yeah. So how do you get people to buy into the fact that it does take some work, it takes some time, it takes practice of many of these things, not just one, breathing type meditation.
Yeah, it's a good question. And I think that in many ways, we're fortunate as a treatment center. The people that are reaching out to us are in a place in their life where they're saying, something isn't working, and I need to do something different. And um, and if we said, okay, well, that different thing, it's going to take a while and it's going to be really frustrating and you're not going to enjoy it, they're going to say, never mind.
Call someone else.
Yeah, I'll try it somewhere else. So there's truth in that. It does take time. It takes time for the brain to heal. It takes time for me to become more fluent in these practices that I'm trying out. And so even though there's truth in that it takes time, along the way, I get to have these new experiences where I'm feeling better within my body, or my mind is feeling more cleared up, or I'm having some new interactions with people that historically have been contentious or upsetting or difficult.
Now I feel
I'm
at
finding
ease.
my way through them in a more useful way. And so uh, it's as people are coming in to a treatment center like this, they're recognizing that there is going to be some challenge to this work. And so we've tried to create a container that allows for them to experience that struggle and challenge uh, with a lot of support, so that they don't feel like the uncomfortable feelings mean that they're doing something wrong, or that it's not working, or that that they're doomed to fail because they're feeling angry, upset, or sad. But that they can go through these processes of transformation, um, slowly and gradually, while experiencing some of these moments of real excitement and joy, and some of these promises of recovery being fulfilled. So it takes time, yes. And if I'm committed to it, I have enough of those moments of feeling really, um, of feeling a lot better along the way.
Right. There has to be some kind of reward or people wouldn't continue, right?
Yeah, well, and to get back to that earlier question about we wanted to do something different, part of what really is different, aside from the emphasis on the team being in recovery, is that we wanted to move from talking about recovery or giving people worksheets, um, or doing a lot of cognitive work, which there's fine work in that arena too. But we wanted to really move to a place wherein the client would feel a felt shift. So it's not just the Sundo practice that we do. We do a lot of experiential psychotherapy. We do inner child work, healing through creativity. There are all these modalities where we're working not to simply get either a moral or cognitive agreement, because a lot of people, um, they've been told for so many years, don't do that. That's bad. When they know that that's bad or it's not helpful or it's not constructive, but that's not actually helping them to change. When they can experience the felt shift of that change, then they start to get a real buy-in because it's from within.
The experiences that we have of uh, being made wrong for being the one that we are early in life is experienced as traumatic. And so, I was bullied and picked on, and yet like it was these maybe smaller moments where like I would get a look that I was so embarrassing, just my existence embarrassed somebody else, that created so much tension within myself that those were the moments where I retreated inward and said, I can't be myself any longer. And coming out of that is terrifying, because now I'm being asked to let go of this mask and this shield that I've used for so many years, to come back to this self that was shamed so long ago, and I'm afraid I'm going to be shamed for being me again. And so it is a process of undoing that trauma and grieving the loss of time or of loved ones or my drug of choice, to get to a place where I can accept myself again as just a broken person trying to heal.
Yeah, I think so many people get the message that they're not okay, that who they are isn't okay.
Mhm.
And why some people respond to substances and go that route and others don't is a bit of a mystery yet today, even though we know more about genetics and other things. Um, I had a similar experience. I moved every few years as a kid growing up, made me very extroverted. But everybody who I've talked to who has struggled with substance use disorder has told me that first or second time they used a substance, they found their answer. And I heard you say
Mhm.
something like that earlier in the conversation,
Yeah.
that it's a solution. It's a solution for people. That's why people do it.
Well,
Yeah.
yeah. So the first time I took an opioid, I remember I had this thought, and I had been told for years, you don't want to use drugs, you'll get addicted right away. And that concept didn't make much sense to me. I didn't really understand, like, you take something and turn it into a monster. And then the first time I took an opioid, the thought I had was, this is so unfair that normal people get to feel like this all the time, and I need to take this to feel normal. So the distorted belief I had was that other people felt this content and at ease every day, and I was the one that was left without the necessary wiring or whatever it was,
Yeah.
and needed to have this substance just to catch up to where everybody else was. Now, it wasn't true, but that was the really early stages of my addiction.
And I've heard other people describe it almost exactly the same. That when they found this substance, they finally felt like normal, like everybody else must be feeling this way, with the help that they had with the help of a substance. And actually, it's not true that other people were feeling uncomfortable and all of the other things, and we just dealt with it, right? So, in whatever way we dealt with it. Have you lost a loved one to overdose or fentanyl poisoning? I'd like to invite you to share their story on our new Emily's Hope Memorial website called More Than Just a Number. They were our children, siblings, cousins, husbands, wives, aunts, uncles, and friends. So much more than just a number. You can submit a memorial today on morethanjustanumber.org.
typically where parents really get mixed up is they usually do a combination of being permissive and being authoritarian. So they let things go wild because they're codependent or they're too busy with other things. And then when they come back on scene, they don't come back with loving authority. They come back with a kind of authoritarian, reactive posture. And so to create a lot of safety and trust for a child so that they can find an adequate sense of being able to experience themselves and all their shortcomings and all their greatness within the adult, they need to have this. It's helpful to have this marriage of both a very loving, accepting presence that's also firm and guiding. And if people can marry those things in their therapeutic work, they also become very effective. So like the therapist that is only just loving and mirroring all the time, it tends to enable the client, like in the very worst things that are operating in the client, then just get affirmed. So similarly, if the therapists were sort of rigid and were only focusing on what they needed to change without being compassionate and really embracing them as they're struggling, wouldn't be a very effective therapeutic rapport either. And so it's learning to, in my estimation, it's learning to marry those things. I did a lot of work with kids before I got into therapy and doing therapy as a therapist. I kind of was exploring that whole arena. And that's what I've seen be effective, whether it's working with adolescents or teens.
So, and then I guess maybe just to add my 2 cents to it. So I have 3 kids. I have a almost 12-year-old son, a 9-year-old daughter, and a 4-year-old son. And so I watched this Gabor Mate talk that he was giving a while ago, and a woman in the audience had said, you know, I'm 35 and I really want to have kids, but I'm terrified of having kids because my parents they just I feel like they messed me up so much, and I don't want to do the same thing to my child. And what can I do to prevent passing along all of my issues to my child? And Gabor said, when did your parents get into recovery? And she said, I don't know. I mean, like maybe they're looking into it now, but, and he said, okay, well, do you think that if your parents had gotten into recovery before you were born, do you think that that would have made a difference in your life? And then she said, absolutely. It certainly would have. And he said, well, okay, so you're doing what you can now to work on your issues, to the best of your ability. And so, when, with my oldest son, there are so many things in his personality that remind me of that part of me that was shamed and embarrassed and maybe put my foot in my mouth or went too far out on a limb. And I can get so uptight or worried for him because I don't want him to have those experiences. But, and so in my parenting of him, I need to be really in touch with like that, my, my impulse to scold or contain or to put those limits in place is sometimes coming from a place of my own shame and my own embarrassment. And it's this unnecessary protection that he doesn't need, that, he's got friends that, think that he's wonderful in all of his weirdness. And so, and it's wonderful, but it's my issue. And so, they each have their own personality um, and I know that they're going to live their own individual lives that I can't control. But what recovery has taught me is just that um, all I can do is work on myself to be the best version of myself that I can be consistently enough that my kids know that there's a safe, consistent presence in their life to come to if they're uncertain or if they're struggling or they don't know what to do. If I were pretending like I had all the answers and I didn't make mistakes and, that drugs are bad and it's going to kill them, then it would just promote more of this like secrecy and dishonesty, and they would need to hide certain things because they don't want to get in trouble. And so kids need limits and they need structure. And so I'm not saying let them do what they want as long as they can talk to me about it. I it's just the work in guiding them is more about me taking care of myself so that the limits that I'm placing are not reactive based on my emotional history. Does that make sense?
It does. It does. And it sounds a lot like what you talked about earlier with therapists having, themselves right before working with clients, that parents need to have themselves in the right headspace and when they're raising their children. But I do think it is frightening for parents in today's world with fentanyl out there and other, dangerous analogs stronger than fentanyl, even that it's hard not to always be reactionary when you hear about everything that's going on in the world. And when your child has your genes, which we know genes contribute to substance use disorder. So, I mean, it's hard.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And so trying to find that balance of uh, education and prevention and clarity and all, like I want my children to grow up to be independent, healthy adults that create the lives for themselves that they want. And I don't want to just turn into an internalized voice that's telling them, why they're wrong or why they're bad or what they're not good enough at. And probably will anyway. Like there's things that I can't help but I'm gonna make mistakes and I'm gonna get things wrong. Um, but as much as I can um, notice that the part of me that is so scared can also get really reactive, and that reactivity can create more chaos in the relationship than what would be helpful. Then I can find a way to deal with my own anxiety and my own issues so that the issue I'm scared about is one that I can address in a more constructive way.
And then I wanted to also ask you both if you think that there are things that society is getting wrong about recovery or about substance use disorder that you'd like people to know, or a way to do things. You're trying to do things differently. That's what I hear all along, and the theme in this conversation.
Yeah, I guess one of the things that I would say is that what society gets wrong is that some people need recovery and others don't. I'd say that
That's the
everybody
first.
needs recovery.
Yeah, yeah. Like most people who are even um, appearing as well adjusted and doing really well in life are struggling with things inwardly, and they're compensating. A lot of people, we're in Silicon Valley, and so it's people are compensating hugely by their performative nature and all the ways in which they're maybe exceeding outwardly in life, but still yet struggling inward. And so the issue, even if you're not struggling with substance use, the issue of codependence, there's a lot of work to do in that. And that's a really powerful arena. And it's also a little more mysterious because it's not as concretized as a substance.
Yeah, but you might see this is a really common term that people use. And if you hear this term, just know that codependence is at the root of it. And so the term is burnout,
Yeah.
right? So when you hear people say, like, I'm just getting burnt out, or, like I have to go to this seminar for preventing burnout,
Yeah.
it's what's at the root of it is this codependent issue where I'm looking to manage all of these circumstances outside of me to be as I want them to be so that I can be okay, rather than doing the work of recovery, which is to get back to what do I need to do to take care of myself despite circumstances being as they are.
That's so interesting. I've never heard it put that way. Burnout. You hear it, that's sort of a buzzword right now, right? In our society. I mean, people are so busy. And I remember working in television for 35 years and the constant deadlines and the
Um,
constant pressure. And I did feel burned out.
yeah.
I mean, I did. I don't feel burned out now, but I did then. And
Yeah.
so
But
you want to analyze me?
well, no, we can do that later. But no, but it can be confusing for people because we do have stressors and we do have deadlines and there are obligations and things that that we need to show up for. It's just that when I begin to mistranslate that need as I have to, rather than like I'm choosing to, I want to, even though I don't like these choices, they're still choices I'm making. Now I
Mm.
lost in that trap of it's the externals that are making me rather than my relationship to these choices is what's creating this experience.
Yeah.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense to me anyway. Because I thought about that long after I left that arena, that it really was my choice. So I, didn't have anyone else to blame for my burnout other than myself. And I think that can translate into a lot of different aspects of our lives.
for sure. And, to say I didn't have anyone else to blame but me, that there can be something really empowering in that accountability that like, the, the blame helps me feel like, uh, I would have made a different choice if I could have, or, it's just, it had to go this way. And if I have to take responsibility for so much of the pain that I experienced, it can be even more painful and really difficult. And so, it's not about I'm to blame as much as I wasn't in a place at that time to really see it clearly. How hooked in I was to this work or this system, or what it is that I was striving for.
Well, it's been a really interesting and enlightening conversation with both of you. And we will put all of your information about your recovery center in our show notes as well. And I just wondered if you wanted to leave our listeners and viewers with anything else.
Or we could leave them with a lot of different things.
Yeah, I'll offer. So we were talking about this last night. Whatever the issue that you're struggling with, the beautiful thing about getting into recovery and doing this meaningful work is that each year you can really begin to feel more agency in the areas that you struggle with. So that when you reach that end of the year, it can be quite a celebration of where you're living from today versus how you felt in the past. And so, recovery is really the discovery of new possibilities. So wherever you are, whatever you're struggling with, you can face those same issues and those same challenges with greater empowerment. And, yeah, that's my main offering.
What I hear in that is hope.
Yeah.
That's what I hear.
Yeah. And I guess I would maybe just want to offer that, for me, 12 steps was such a big part of my recovery journey. And there were a ton of other pieces, but if you're struggling with an addiction to a substance, Alcoholics Anonymous, Narcotics Anonymous are great resources. If you have a loved one that's struggling with an addiction, Al-Anon is a great resource. If you don't have a family member struggling with an addiction, or say you have parents that were less than functional or destructive forces in your life, adult children of alcoholics is a great 12-step fellowship. And then if you're struggling to find your sense of center and continue to find yourself in these relational patterns that are unfulfilling, Coda or Codependence Anonymous is a fantastic fellowship. So there are these free resources and groups of people that are getting together to work on themselves. This time of year is great in recovery because there's marathon meetings. So certain places will have meetings every hour on the hour. And so if you can't get to a meeting, there's a bunch of resources. If you have insurance, you could call them to find out, if you have therapists in your area. But there are people out there that are willing to support if you're willing to make those calls.
Get the support and get the help that you need. You don't have to suffer alone. And we have a plethora of resources on our website as well. So we'll leave people with that final note. Such an important thing to remind people you're not alone in this, and there are people willing to help, and there are people who've been through. I don't care what it is. There are people who've been through what you've been through that can help. So thank you both for joining me today.
Thank you for having
Thank
us.
you.
This podcast is produced by Casey Wannenberg King and Kaylee Fitz.